Hey, so this recording is a little bit delayed, but I wanted to get the interview with Kyle Shiparski of the Laporte County Drug Task Force out. We recorded this right as IACP was going down here in Boston, and it was just an awesome discussion, but it kind of got lost in the sauce in all the hoopla of the conference. So I hope you enjoy this one. Kyle is a good friend and a really awesome podcast guest. So looking forward for you guys to enjoy this one. Awesome. So, Kyle, we got you in town for IACP. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, the craziness of IACP and first time perspective, I think, for both of us.
Yeah.
For my first IACP too. But before we do that, can you kind of give just a short background on who you are and maybe a little how we know each other too?
Yeah. My name's Kyle Shiparski. I am a commander of a joint jurisdictional HIDA or federally funded drug task force out of Michigan City, which is in Northwest Indiana. Kind of the nature of that in and of itself for me is that I'm an employee of the Michigan City Police Department. I'm a sergeant with them. I've been there 12 years.
Yeah.
And I think that, well, really, you and I kind of got connected through a guy named Ryan Johnson.
Yeah.
Ryan Johnson, when I met him, he worked for the ATF as an agent, and then he left and went into kind of corporate security. And
Right.
I think you had him.
Tempest, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. And he's the one who just hit me in the email one day and said, "Hey, I think you should take a look at this." And when I did, the kind of ball went rolling from there, and you and I got to link up for what felt like a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to see beautiful Michigan City.
Yeah. Yeah. It's getting there.
Yeah.
It is a cool
It's a cool town. Yeah.
I think it has a lot of potential and it's growing. And, I think to the point, it's like one of the unique things about Michigan City is it's like in this like corridor between Chicago and Chicago, Illinois, and then up, 5 minutes north is Michigan. And so we have lakefront property all along Lake Michigan. And then you got, some more, inner city type thing there, but it's an interesting town to work for. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've done a lot of interesting things. I got to do I think one of my first ride-alongs was with you, which was a pretty good time.
Yeah.
A pseudo ride-along, I think. We won't say what happened on that ride-along, but I invited Kyle to come onto the podcast and also to come out to IACP. It's, I guess, what is it, the 21st of October today. IACP is in full swing. It's my first time there. First of all, it's freaking massive.
Yeah.
Helicopters and, ATVs and, all those different things around there. And then software everywhere. Like, what's your, I know you got your chiefs to come along too. Like, what's your take?
Yeah. So super interesting, right? Like, I mean, I think I came into it with this idea of, relatively speaking, small town law enforcement agency.
Yeah, how big is Michigan City?
So Michigan City Police Department's just under 100 sworn officers.
Yeah, right.
In a town of 40,000 people. But when the opportunity came to come out here to go, I know in the past my administration has been out there, but they are right now very, I think, forward-looking in terms of their leadership style and what they're trying to promote within the agency to combat some of these things like retention and just quality of life in the job. And so they agreed to let me come out here. And I think yesterday, I landed 2 days ago, but when I got to the convention yesterday, I felt like I was like a minnow in, Lake Michigan, like swimming around this, this exhibition floor where, like you said, helicopters, all that kind of stuff. But I think my biggest takeaway was, when you venture out from like the big guys and you start going around the kind of exterior of it, some of the smaller booths, you see so much officer wellness, you see so much, leadership based stuff, and then you see a lot of just technology based companies, which I think in the past, especially prior to this huge wave of tech coming into law enforcement, everybody's trying to sell you a Bearcat. Everybody's trying to sell you
Glock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're there. Don't get me wrong, right? Those are
They actually have a great booth. I went over to the Glock booth. It was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, those are the big guys and they're there, but it was just kind of cool to sit and connect and talk to some of those people, that were there kind of on what I perceived like this leading edge push, in law enforcement.
I think what I didn't realize, like, this is my first time at the conference. We've done a multitude. I'm like, if I was wearing my multitude hat, we've done a ton of conferences, but this is our first IACP. And my take is that, like, if you're on that outside edge, that, like, this is the vendor hat, is like, if you're on that outside edge, like, it's hard to get attention. It's really hard to get attention because in the middle you have Airbus with their helicopter. You have Axon with, 100 by 60 space, with rows and rows of VR goggles and obsoleting the bullet and all this stuff, and Mark 43 and Karasoff and all these huge people. That it's tough. It's tough to, like, grab mind share, but there's also, like, so much. We were kind of talking before we started recording, like there's so much business happening on the floor. Like, that's probably pretty new too, coming up from your rank and position in the agency to, like, seeing that for the first time. Like, what's your read?
Yeah, I joked with you. It's everybody's looking at your neck tag, your pass to see where you fall into it, and the funny thing is like, and you're I guess, stranger to this, but you just never know where the sale can come through. And I think, again, with our agency, what makes it a little more unique is, like, I'm a sergeant, and I oversee, a task force, but I talk to my administration regularly, and you and I kind of walk that path where it's like, I still report to them regularly and everything like that, but I also have my own budget that I can run and own resources. And so
the task force,
and so some of those conversations I had yesterday, like, once people started talking to me a little bit, they realized, hey, there's still an opportunity here, but it is all about dollars and cents out there. And as the world spins and as the world goes, but I think I've mentioned to you earlier, one of the most interesting things is, like, the monetization of technology within law enforcement, right? Because you look at government contracts now, everything is just, sky high as it is. Once they, see the G on it, it's like, it's going to be 3 times the cost, And so I'm really curious to see how things play out in the next few years, and what that looks like in technology for law enforcement.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, a weird space. You get these old guys that are out there, they've clearly been selling to cops forever, and then I would say, like, as a younger startup in the space, like Multitude, we come in and we're happy to talk to the sergeant, actually, like, because that's a lot of time where we actually find a lot more traction as, like, the ground level. But we had we're like at the conference, kind of as, like, a sidecar to Mark 43, because we have a partnership with them, and watching them. They had 35 people there. There's a whole marketing operation, right? Like, a much more mature conference game plan. It's pretty interesting to see just, like, the scale, size, and the party at night, that kind of
It gets to be easily overwhelming, but I think once you realize, I think I guess the way it played out for me yesterday was I went down there and I, like, kind of took it in, and I went to a few sessions. Some of those, I went to a few really great sessions yesterday. So I did a couple of leadership based sessions, which really like leaned heavy on, as law enforcement gets through this stage of, not enough people do the job, as people start coming into this profession again, especially the younger generation. And then on top of it, how you retain these employees. And so, like, a lot of the couple of classes I went to, they just harp so much on how investing in your people can really help retain them. And that to me, you know, in my 12 years of experience as law enforcement, like that's a departure from how it was, right? Because when I got hired, you were just thankful to have the job.
Yeah.
And it was put your nose down.
Get in line.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm also a different generation. You know, you have this newer generation that is here and they value just so many different things, you know, and I think it will, generally speaking, be the better for our profession as time goes on. But point being is, you know, I went to these couple breakout sessions or whatever, and then I kind of went back down with a plan, like, all right, what do I want to look at? Because it is organized. That floor is organized a little bit where you can kind of like go up and down an aisle 3 or 4 times and kind of see something new every time.
Hit a bunch of wellness stuff.
Yeah.
And that is kind of blowing up too. I noticed that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, I think that is a direct correlation to what the priorities of, like, especially younger officers are right now, right? They have a want for that work-life balance. They have, you know, a desire to have that time away, you know, so that they can more realistically just have a better mental well-being while doing this job.
We had the same thing when I was in the Navy, like kind of towards the end of my active duty time, and definitely now as a reservist, like a lot of conversations around work-life balance. Like I think you get these like tends to be like the generation probably above you and I, or maybe 2 generations above you and I, that are like, you know, like, yeah, there is no work-life balance. Like work is life, life is work. And there's a little part of me that agrees, like, hey, this is a uniform job. Like I'm a pilot or a naval flight officer in the Navy. Like, yeah, I'm going to work some 18-hour days. Like that's normal and expected. How does that play out for you? I mean, this is like at its core level, patrol is shift work, hard shift work, get the shit beat out of you.
Yeah.
You're running and people don't like you all day in some cases, right? And then get up and do it again, another 12-hour shift the next day if you have one of those, you know, depending on what you have as your shift schedule. Like, what's the like vibe from this 1 or 2 generations older? Like they're obviously buying some stuff because there's all these vendors here. Like they're starting to invest a little, but I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Cops seem even more stubborn on that than the military.
Yeah. And that is like that's the barrier in my mind with a lot of these companies. That's the barrier.
Yeah.
Cops don't like change, right? But what cops do like is if you make their job easier, right?
Yeah.
You see this. You see this with, you know, there was this huge wave of departments now having their own social workers, right? The purpose of that is to, like, you know, is to relieve the officer on scene of dealing with an issue that really is outside their own scope, right? And that was something for sure that communities push, but it's so important because now that frees the time for the officer to go either proactive or just spend more time doing stuff that's maybe probably a better use of their tools and skills. And I think that eventually, probably sooner than later, just at the rate technology goes, like officers will see that pay off, right? Like, hey, if I let technology come in a little bit, it's going to help me write reports faster. It's going to help me, you know, clear call or clear scene faster or be more prepared when I arrive there, right? And so I think there's all these implications that technology has for our field that, as always, like, police just have to get out of their own way to do it. But especially being at this conference and listening to some of these, you know, higher up, whether it's a CEO of a company or an admin or another chief, it's like that change has to come from the top, right? You don't have a group of, you know, 60 patrolmen walking the floor shopping for their own company or their own part.
I actually saw a small group of like BPD who's like clearly they were like working, right? They're, you know, BPD patrol officers working the floor from a security perspective, but like, you know, eyes are wandering, they're checking stuff out. And I thought to myself, like, damn, like it would actually be really cool if more of that happened, even though like Joe Blow patrol officer, like maybe isn't the right guy to like decide the technological direction of the force. Like a lot of times they're more fluent in this stuff than leadership. Like, so I don't know. Like when you and I first met too, like I was at first like, oh, it's a sergeant. Like there's no way that can move towards technology procurement. But like it has to push up from the bottom. And those are the best, again, like vendor hat on, like those are the best sales when it's coming from somebody that's saying like, hey, I need this.
Yeah.
It's going to make my job better.
Well, and I think especially for someone, like yourself or even someone in this space, like it's getting that in with law enforcement, right? It's like once you can if you can find, your in, whether that be through an administrator or, again, or just in the way that I view kind of how we got connected, especially was that like, hey, this is awesome. Like, let me just start pushing this, right? Like you can't possibly, it's all networking, right? You can't possibly have that network, right? Because, it took me a decade to build that myself, right? But I'm
just starting to like recognize people as I walk the floor, like, oh, hey, Matt, hey, like that's finally happening.
That's awesome.
3 years in.
Right, right. And but again, I think that is one of those things in law enforcement that you can never put a price on, right? And the same thing for really any other field where it's heavily relied on personal relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that is that other bit to this push in technology within the field is you need to be able to trust the company and the people that represent it, that they have your agency's best interest in mind. And that is a really hard sell.
How do you, this is a selfish question as I like chart the course as a startup. Like, how do you decide if you trust a vendor? Like is it personal relationship with like, hey, you and I know each other. We met in the context of like, hey, I want to try this new information sharing tool. Again, this is not a podcast about our company, but like, how do you decide that, I'll give these dudes a shot?
Well, I think it's largely based on that personal relationship, right? Like you're not going to make a sale over the phone to the police department. No. And I think you have on one end, you just have, hey, by going to trainings or doing whatever, that any officer, administrator, whatever, sees a product they like, brings it back to their department, kind of jockeys for it.
Yeah.
Maybe they trial it, whatnot. But the other part is like what I've seen during the conference is, and I use my own county as an example, was that one of the vendors there had retained an officer as like an employee, right? Like retired, and they acquired
standard practice.
Yeah. But now that company just bought, and it bought all those relationships because, obviously as law enforcement, that individual and they're vouching for this company. Yes, they work for them, but like that is a huge way we work anyway. So I think you have that gamut of kind of outlets to I guess get your way into any specific department.
Yeah. It's such a probably the most parochial business model I've ever encountered, and it's awesome because I've got to build out these relationships. But I would say like year 1 and year 2 was like painful, slow. We really had to find the people that were like the technology believers early, and then like impress them and be able to slowly work your way up into, oh yeah, I've heard your name before, and like, okay, cool, let's talk. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about like one of the cool things when we met was I didn't know what HIDA was. Like that, you were literally the first HIDA. And for people that don't know, it's a high intensity drug trafficking area, right?
Yeah.
So it's a designation. Can you talk a little about like HIDA's writ large, and then like Laporte County Drug Task Force, and like what do you guys do? What have you done well?
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I came in again. I got hired in Michigan City, 12 years ago. I've been in the drug task force since year 1 of our HIDA designation, which was in 2016.
Okay.
So HIDA it's awesome for local agencies if you can get it.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not easy because there's a limited amount of government funds. It's a grant-based federal program where it's by state, right? Yeah. So like Laporte County Drug Task Force is a part of the Indiana HIDA. And so they get a grant budget every year
from the federal government.
Yep. And then the HIDA will then have designated areas or task force throughout the state.
Right.
So in 2016, my predecessors in the drug task force, along with Michigan City administration, the county administration, got together and filled out this application to do it. Now it was one, do the application, but it's also, we go back to this idea of networking and personal relationships. Like you got to have those to get this distinction because it's meaningful, right? And So in 2016, we get the designation, and the Laporte County Drug Task Force is kind of formed.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I can say is just resources in the way of you get to plug into the networking that's there, but then you obviously get funded by them, right? And so, since 2016, our budget has only grown.
Yeah.
But that is in large part not because there's necessarily more money to be had, but it's more about what are we as a task force doing to put them in, right?
It's like based on your successes, more
Yeah.
flow to Laporte versus somewhere else type
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
So like 10 years ago, a drug task force, their focus is going to be, hitting the corners, hitting the streets,
Yep.
doing undercover buys, that kind of thing. And by all means, that's still like a huge part of what we do.
Yep.
That's kind of like the bread and butter,
Yeah.
right? And
I'm thinking my first visit to Michigan City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't gloss it over because it's fun work.
Yeah.
It's great. It is
Yeah,
literally the
exciting.
most fun I think that I know I'll have in my career. But moving forward, what ends up happening within at least the Laporte County Drug Task Force is that you start to realize what that HIDTA mission is, right? Which is essentially to identify, disrupt, and dismantle drug trafficking organizations. And then, and again, it's like all roads lead back to kind of what we're talking about, right? Like you take that approach and you see the level of connectedness that drug traffickers have, right? Hey, which is only
the bad guys.
Yep, which is only, multiplied by an unlimited force at this point, right?
Yeah.
Through social media and all that stuff. Like,
yeah,
there's this old mentality of, we want to just do a bunch of buys in our town, but that doesn't solve the problem, right? What solves the problem is identifying these organizations and then working with the adjoining agencies and jurisdictions in and around your area, whether it be statewide or national or whatever, to dismantle these things, because you're not going to stop the flow, but if you can really kind of cripple these organizations that are responsible for letting those drugs come into the community,
the
impact that has on your specific community is extremely meaningful.
What are you guys seeing, like, in terms of the drugs that are actually on the street? Like, what's coming in right now, and like how the kind of follow-on question is like, how much of this is like Mexican cartel? How much is other South American groups? Like, how much of it's homegrown?
Yeah, I mean, this day and age, I mean, it's all Mexico, China, those types of things.
Fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl pills, like the M30s as they call them, they look like oxycodone, but they lack a time release coating, and so they're not shiny. They're like chalky, right? And that's
stuff I would not know.
Yeah, well, and here we are, right? Because like it's this epidemic now, that is big business. And, meth is still really big too, but it's all, when I first started, there would be, your one pot operations in a house that's done. Meth is so cheap right now, especially out by us, but it's all, Mexican cartels and stuff like that. And the idea that you're going to shut that machine down, that's something like that the, DEA fights
forever.
Yeah, they will be in perpetuity, right?
So I kind of wanted to ask that question too, is like, okay, you're going to go make some street buys. You're going to that'll take some drugs off the market, also potentially give you some intelligence about like where sources are coming in, gives you a chance to talk to like the storefront of the cartel, if you will. But like, how do you move up the chain? Like, have you guys had success doing that? I don't know if you can talk about it or not, but like, how do you take it to where it's actually like strategically important?
Yeah. So the way I always put it is, and especially when I'm talking to like the community in which I serve, right?
Yeah.
That we are heavily target orientated, right? Mm-hmm. So typically the people that tend to be a little bit better at, kind of distributing narcotics are the ones that have done it before, right?
Right.
They get caught. They see their paperwork and their discovery, how they got caught, and then they evolve.
And say, I won't do that again.
Yeah. So like in Michigan City, what we see especially, or in Laporte County and part of the task force is, maybe I can go buy, 10 fentanyl pills from Jane Doe.
Yeah, great.
But she's, Jane Doe's got to have it, right? And she is not, the dealer, right? She's just trying to support her own habit.
Yeah.
She needs something like we were talking, like a social worker, right?
Yeah.
Somebody in the industry that, hey, I can link you up with this person. They can help with your problem, which is an addiction
Yeah.
problem, right?
That's the like community outreach piece.
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool. We got the drugs off of you. Comment. Like,
yeah,
how are we going to get you to stop buying drugs?
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have like, you know, let's say John Doe, who, hey, this guy has been, you know, in prison 3 times for selling drugs. Like, now we're interested in you because you have this extensive history, you know, and, you know, maybe there's some violence in there, maybe there's not, but, or maybe there's some gun charges or something that kind of like sweetens that pot from a law enforcement standpoint. Like, you are a problem because you're a recidivist, but not only that you've shown that you're not trying to do better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you don't care.
Yeah. And so then we start kind of really digging into like those kind of targets. Right. And so, you know, but in order to climb that ladder, the age-old system is, you know, instead of going to jail, you know, do you want to help yourself out? I can help you on your case, but you got to help us climb that ladder.
You want to go home or you want to go to jail?
Yeah, hence my sweatshirt.
Yeah. I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
One of my favorite t-shirts is the Laporte County FAFO shirt.
Yep. I should have brought you one of these.
Yeah.
It was the newer
It's a new one. Yeah, I love it.
But you know, again, so that's how you climb that ladder, right? You flip people, you get them to help your investigation out to climb higher. And you know, and again, that's one way. And that's the typical way for like a smaller joint task force like myself.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a million ways to kind of like, you know, get the job done, but like that's the tried and true, you know, and I think that
build that network out at the grassroots.
Yep. And you know, and again, like sometimes, you know, I've got people I talk to within the community that they don't necessarily do much besides call me and say, hey, this happened and
I saw this thing.
Yeah. And like, or give you information. Right. And that's the other thing I always say is like in my position, in my world, in the world of narcotics, firearms, like information is 80% of the job. Right. Yeah. And then the other.
Yeah, you guys are an intel operation.
Exactly.
As far as I'm concerned, like thinking about it from the military lens, like you're an N2 shop. That's the intel shop. Right.
But that's also like one of these areas where it's like, that's where as a drug task force, like we need help in that area from technology, right? Like if I were to leave the task force tomorrow, right, I have a group of people that I talk to that are my informants. I have this information in my head.
Yeah.
Right.
Corporate knowledge.
Yeah. But there's not a really good way for me to pass that information down. I mean, I could take my work phone that's got all this stuff and hand it to somebody, right, and say, here you go, you know, but like that's not the solution, you know, in that sense. And that's like, I think that's why you know, when you and I connected, I was like, man, like, there is things out there that are emerging.
One of the things you first wanted Bulletin for, in addition to being able to like push, was like deconfliction. I remember you were like, what if we could do, you know, we start playing the what if game with products. And it ended up being the deconfliction piece because it was, I think the example you gave me was like, hey, sometimes I do want patrol to run traffic stops in this area. Other times there might be a reason I don't want them doing any traffic stops in the area, right? Like stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the deconfliction piece is like, HIDE is huge on that. And that is extremely beneficial, right? And especially when you're trying to maybe infiltrate an organization from a different angle. And you can work within our agency to get in that way without having to use maybe, you know, someone locally, if you will.
Yeah.
But to your point, you know, it's this idea that there's strategic moves that we can make with an investigation just to kind of shake a tree, right? Like if we get to this point where we're kind of at a impasse in a case, right, where it's like we don't have an informant, but like we really want to continue to, you know, get into this space. Well, I would love patrol to just start heating up the area and do stops, and maybe they get into
lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you know, and then they get an informant on, and then we're back on the game, you know, But yeah, the deconfliction was key, and just communication with, and in your case, like with Bulletin, like not every patrolman in the department, but like this select group. Like I would love to show 20 officers our cases because I trust them more or less, right?
Right. Yeah, you have an internal insider threat sometimes too. You want to like be cautious of. You know?
Yeah, and I too, it's like that's the other thing too within law enforcement. It's funny. It's like we're our own worst enemy. Like I don't ever think there's a very, very rare. Right? Like 1% of the time, I think you're going to have a cop who's like, has like bad intention.
Yeah, on the
You know?
take from the game.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
More often than not, it's like this idea that there is these officers that just want to do good, but like don't realize when to kind of pull it back, or
Yeah.
when like, hey, I know you want to be active. I know you want to be out there stopping cars and doing the good stuff, but like stay away from this area because we're doing it. Well,
There's something bigger going on here.
yeah, but then, you know, in their mind, it's like, well, that's like, I can go there and I know I can get some stuff done, right? Well,
That's a good idea.
yeah, but, you know, and so the idea is, excuse me, that if I have those 20 officers that I know will kind of heed what we have going on, like I love pushing them. I mean, we do it through email now, right?
Sure.
Which is archaic.
That's my soul.
I know. I know.
We'll get you out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll fix that. Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, there's just a lot of benefit to being compartmentalized, as all law enforcement is really, but at the same time, using that compartmentalization to like work for us in ways that prior to some of these new technologies that are coming, it's just impossible.
Yeah. Can you point to any, like, I know some of this work is tough to talk about publicly, but like, can you point to any big successes over the years at the task force that really like you felt like you guys got one? You know, because I know sometimes it can feel like, I don't know, like the Sisyphean task, right? You're always pushing that boulder up the hill and it's never getting easier, but like any big win.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, and that's the one thing is like, I would be remiss if I didn't say like the successes are all on the backs of the team that you have.
Yeah,
like the team that, you know, I've worked with a lot of different people over the last, you know, 7 years, but everyone that I've come into contact that have become permanent fixtures within our task force, you know, like they're just incredible people.
Yeah.
Right? They're incredible people who care about what they do, take pride in what they do. And more importantly, like we see each other more than we do our own family.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, you got to tolerate,
like, it's like, I always just say like all the guys in my squadron, I like live, play, breathe with you guys. Yeah.
You know, and so there's this like, you know, enigma where the way we communicate is unique. The things that we find funny are unique, right? But But at the end of
that's certainly true. Yeah.
At the end of the day, like it's the work that motivates us, you know? And so, you know, the case, like there's cases for sure that are wins, right? Like, and I think for me personally, like when I talk about cases that mean the most is that, you know, especially with the advent of fentanyl becoming so popular and this like huge increase in people dying from it, right? Yeah. That's a whole separate topic, right?
Yeah.
In terms of
different podcasts.
Like addiction and stuff like that. But what I'll say is this is when you get called to an overdose death scene and there's somebody who's died from fentanyl overdose, there's probably 4 people there at least, right? That are family that are now impacted by this, right? Yeah. Yes, they all know their loved one had a problem. Yes, they all know that they've been likely living in that life for some time. Yeah, substantial amount of time, but it's still the death of a loved one, right?
Yeah.
So we had a couple years ago, or now it's probably 3 years ago. And again, like these cases take forever, but like it's still wrapping up now, right? But we had like 1 week. I remember it vividly because I was on call this week. Right? Yeah. With 1 week, there was like 4 overdose deaths, all within, you know, 4 or 5 days.
Damn.
Which in our area is unique.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Like usually our average, you know, we average like between 25 and 35 overdose deaths a year.
Okay. So that's a big week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we respond to these scenes or whatnot. And as we kind of push this case forward, we're starting to realize that like they're not all maliciously connected, right? Where it's like there's someone out there trying to kill these people, but it's it's like the same drug, right? It's coming from the same person.
Okay.
Somebody right up the chain. Yeah. And in this case, over the course of like almost a year, we end up climbing this chain, right? Through, you know, and the main way was talking to people. Mm-hmm. But then this was right on the time when I think phone data became truly digestible by law enforcement through, you know, companies like a cell or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so we start connecting these dots, right? Using some old technology that we have by just sitting down and interviewing people, all the way up to, the analysis of phone data and everything like that. Well, after a while, we start kind of crawling up this ladder through the what we would call like retail dealers, right? Where it's like, hey, maybe their client base is like 10 people, 15 people.
Yeah. That's like their primary thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then you start getting up, and eventually what ends up happening is from a total what I call grassroots, right? We started off by buying, half gram of heroin fentanyl, and then it eventually leads into this multi-state drug trafficking organization that, goes up into Milwaukee, to California, down to the border, and it was not possible with all the other agencies, right? But like you talk about deconfliction, there was one crazy day, right? Like we had built our whole case into the HIDA's network, right? A deconfliction, and marshals executed a search warrant up in Milwaukee, and they ran a name they saw on a piece of mail, and the whole thing just went rattles. Yeah. And so, that case specifically, and we started off in law enforcement. It's funny because one of the biggest conversations you have when you identify an organization is, what are we going to name?
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so
it's like operation names.
Yeah, exactly. So you get it. And so it's, for me, it's this thing. It's like I always sit. Just last week we had like 3 of these that we were trying to identify. I'm like, all right, everybody, team meeting. Yeah. Let's name some.
Yeah, really get here. We're going to talk about this.
Yeah, and the names ranged, but in this case, like we named this one aptly, like Deadly Dose. Yeah, right. It was Operation Deadly Dose, and it ends up, and case in point, I guess at the end of it, what we saw was the dismantling of not only a drug trafficking organization, but the IRS came in, and there was large scale Medicare fraud,
tax.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you're talking. I mean, and like the scope of it was totally unseen by us before, but, and that's hats off to those guys and gals up in Milwaukee that just we took this little morsel that we gave them, and we had a lot of historical information, and it pumping that into their machine up there, it's crazy, and I like that story one of the best, because it highlights how good we as law enforcement can be when we have the avenues to talk to each other, whether you're sitting next to me or whether you're on the other side of the country, and that has to continue to get better. And if it does, then what makes me super stoked is it's just going to make us be more efficient, better at our jobs. And that's a win on all levels.
So this is it kind of leading me there naturally, but talking a little bit about AI, and even since you and I met 2 years ago, things have popped off, right? ChatGPT wasn't a thing. Now is, you're starting to see, Axon's doing the AI report writing, there's now we can digest large amounts of data. Are you seeing that yet, on ground level in your task force work? Is AI playing a role yet, or is it still kind of too much of a frontier technology that, it's not, I don't know, impacting your daily? Or where's it at?
Here's my perspective, and and again, I always give the caveat that law enforcement is generally done the same way nationwide. Depending on where you are in the country, it can look slightly different, right? And especially maybe you're at different levels of the game. The higher you go in drug work, the more business it becomes, right? That's why, you go to talk to undercover guys and stuff. It's the most dangerous stuff you can do in the dope game is buy a gram of at a time, right? Because people are going to rob you. Versus once you're at that, once you're buying kilos, aside from going down to Mexico and putting yourself in a bad situation, generally speaking, it's a pretty transactional thing. Obviously there's the outliers, but with that said,
I've seen Miami Vice. I know.
Exactly. Actually, if you watch The Wire,
it's really right. Cool. The Wire's actually fantastic.
But so to your point, what's interesting to me is what I see from my lens is that for probably one of the first times that I have been exposed to it, I feel like we're at approaching this intersection where not everyone is like using AI yet,
Yeah.
right? But there's emerging technologies for consumers to use it. But right at the same time, you've got these forward-thinking companies that are doing public safety that are like, we see this, we know what
Could do something with
yeah.
this. Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see from my perspective, like where that intersection comes.
Yeah.
Because for so long, it's constantly us behind the ball, right?
Yeah.
It's, oh, cell phones, and darn it, now I have to figure out, I mean, I'll like, truth be told, we use Cash App to buy drugs now, right? Like,
No way.
yeah, and I mean but the fact that just is starting to happen within the last couple of years is crazy because electronic money has been
10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And like, organizations have been using them for longer than that, right? And then we have, and so I feel like that, and even phones and social media, like we are typically playing catch up, so we're pretty reactive, right?
Yeah.
And policing, like in my opinion, the more proactive you can be, like the more successful you'll be and the better you are able to serve your community. And so to the question, it's like, as these two roads inevitably merge, I would love to see a world where law enforcement maybe even harnesses that sooner than later, so it can be a little bit ahead.
A little more ahead of the power curve.
Yeah. And, and again, like things like the report writing stuff and those types of things that AI can help us do our job better and faster. It's going to be just as important to see what is AI going to do to help us, and you tipped your hat a little bit to me about some stuff where it's like predictive.
Yeah.
Like, where do I need more guys at? Where do I want to put more officers at? Because, this time over the last 3 years.
Historical data.
Yeah, like that's huge.
I think that like, kind of like, I'll use an improv response, like yes, and like, I think that AI is still kind of like searching for its most best use case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really think the stuff that these people are doing with like using body cam footage to like preempt the start of a police report is cool, will save time. But then you hear the like community reaction to AI authoring of police reports.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they would read one and not know, but then if you tell them that an AI helped write the police report, like it becomes adversarial really quickly. And so, I mean, that could abate. I think like if I'm looking into my crystal ball, maybe that abates as like general population gets more comfortable with AI in more facets of their life, as their regular Google, Gemini, Gmail suite is in their daily life and they realize the benefits, as Apple Intelligence on your iPhone comes online and like, 70% of the population has like a daily interaction with AI. Maybe they don't care that it wrote a police report, but I still think like I haven't seen like the like aha thing inside of law enforcement that's like, maybe, I mean, I also think just like to complete the thought is like, I don't know that there is going to be an AI detective that's doing all of the like soft tasks that a intelligent, task force detective would do. Like they're not, I don't know if that's the right use case, but I do think it's like over the next 2 years, it will be about like speeding administrative work, hopefully removing some of the more duller pieces that you need to do, automating a lot of like the data analysis. So, you do grab, somebody's phone, you're able to pull the things that you can pull and then look at that in a graphical way rather than like a text readout of stuff.
Right.
And then have that summarized. Like, that's great use case of AI. I think it's still hunting for like, we're like this far in, right, of the time scale of like AI. Like AI is going to be the rest of computing for the history of humankind. And we're just like, we're right here. And so I've yet to see, I think we're doing some cool stuff, obviously, but like I've yet to see like exactly how it's going to fit into your, not just Kyle, but like the street cop, like his or her day to day. Like where is that going to be?
Well, I mean, again, I'll give you the anecdotal example of this. So in Indiana, in 2018, I believe, was where they implemented this law of dealing resulting in death, right? You hear about it all the time. Federal government has it. We're not the only state. There's states that do it. We're at the idea that if you sell drugs to somebody that kills them, you're on the body, right?
Yeah.
That's murder, essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
So just prior to that, what I had done is like, and again, in my field, it's like, you got to make yourself valuable, right? In your own department, so that you can try to work towards the things you want to do, or stay where you are, right? So I just got on the drug task force. I was like, all right, what can I do to make myself more valuable? So like, I took like, all these trainings on historical analysis of cell records.
Yeah.
Right? Which I'm here to tell you, like, before then, it was like, there were things like, your cell hawks or your companies that were helping you digest those, but you had to learn, like,
Yeah, it's pretty technical.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'll just tons, you get like a 350-page document, that has all these different things on, and you got to know
every tower to ever hit. Yeah.
And so, and that was the same thing for extractions, right? Like, at the time, phone extractions, they gave them to you, but it was just it was pretty raw data, and so like, we ended up putting it at the time, the task force put together this essentially, manslaughter case for this guy who delivered these drugs. Well, you fast forward to even where it is now, and you look at the technologies that are there, kind of what law enforcement has accepted into our field to help us do our job better, and now there's programs that do that analysis for you. It puts it in a very digestible way, and like all that stuff. And I just
report,
but I think the implications of it are more important, where it's like, again, I look at my own department, and they're bringing new technology on kind of as fast as they can get it through the city council, or their funding sources. And I just think the more foundation you have in technology being layered into your department, like, the more easily you'll be able to bring AI on.
Yeah.
Because in a perfect world, like, and again, this is any investigator, any detective, to your point, you're never going to take that human element out of it. But if you can free up that investigator to do that human element, they'll just do it better. Right. And I think that you look at, we're fortunate enough in our task force that we've got a HIDA analyst and a DEA analyst, right? So I can push them analytical stuff that, 6 years ago I was doing by myself.
Yeah,
I'd be bogged down with, stuff for a long time. But with that said, like, there's going to be a million different ways, I think, with AI that you can make these processes more thorough and less bias. I think it was a big thing too. And I think that will just inevitably be the future, right? In my opinion, like, no one, like you said, AI is not going to be able to dress down and go buy dope off the street, right? But if that frees up our investigators to do more meaningful work in that sense, I think like that's a win, and no one's trying to replace police with AI or with technology, but at the same time, like, we as law enforcement have to let it in.
Well said. I mean, I think it's like AI as co-pilot is the next 5 years. And like, the more that co-pilot can take off your plate so that you can do the big brain thinking, where, the minutia takes you out of it every day. That's where it's going to be.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Excuse me. I know we got to all get over to the conference. So I want to wrap, but one of the things I've been asking people as our traditional closing question on the podcast is, I'm having a blast building my company. Like, it's fun for me. I'm having a blast doing this show. And so I thought I'd ask people, like, what's the most fun you've had lately? I know you're a mountain biker, so I don't know if it's mountain biking, but like, what's the most pure, unadulterated fun you've had in the last few years?
Man, I think for me, it's obviously spending time with family, and that I guess what I'll say is I am a true-hearted, just, let's go somewhere, let's go on an adventure somewhere and do something, hence why I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
after one phone call where I say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah. Right. Let me see if I can make that happen, but like, for me, it's going somewhere, being somewhere, and just doing something unique there. Right. Like, travel has always been a huge part of my life growing up. Like, Christmas time came, it wasn't gifts. It was, hey, we're going to go somewhere and do something.
Yeah.
And
I see the Arches National Park.
Yeah.
That's
get me started on this. That place is probably one of my favorite places on earth.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, to your point, like, if I can go, and this is, again, dips back into this wellness bit for law enforcement is like, we all have to find something we love to do. But in the last few years, it's just like the ability to not only financially, but, as I have more time on my department, get more time off, going somewhere and doing something and sharing that experience to people I want to share it with. Yeah, it's huge for me, and it's huge for my own wellness, but that's when I truly have the most fun.
Yeah, great answer. Well, thanks, Kyle, for coming on and doing this with me. It's also great to see you again.
Yeah, as always.
Yeah. All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, Matt White here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Multitude Insights, and that's kind of my primary day job. But I started this podcast because I wanted to have conversations with the people that I found interesting. So that means the people on the front lines in law enforcement. It means the investors investing in companies, building in public safety. It means leadership and all the people that kind of make this thing work. Right. So if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, the follow button, whatever it might be on whatever platform you're viewing this on. And I'd love to have you along for the journey. Talk to you soon.